The Andromeda Station Arms Expo was exactly the kind of place where you could get vaporized, swindled, or both, depending on how badly you negotiated. Thousands of vendors from across 3 spiral arms had set up shop in the massive rotating marketplace, each one hawking their particular brand of concentrated death to anyone with credits to burn. Jack Torres stepped off the transport shuttle and immediately got shoulder-checked by a Regellian carrying what looked like a molecular destabilizer. Or maybe it was a fancy blender. Hard to tell with alien tech sometimes. He made his way through the crowd, past booths selling everything from neurotoxin grenades to something called a quantum uncertainty cannon, which honestly sounded like a weapon that wasn't sure if it wanted to kill you or not. The air smelled like ozone, propellant, and the distinct aroma of way too many different species crammed into one pressurized environment. Jack's target was booth 317, right between a klaxon selling biological warfare samples and a very enthusiastic Centauri demonstrating portable black hole generators. Probably should have worried about the zoning regulations on that one, but hey, free market and all that. Booth 317 belonged to Krivox, a Thoraxian arms dealer with 4 arms, too many opinions, and a reputation for charging triple what his merchandise was worth. He stood behind a gleaming display of plasma rifles, each one humming with that self-important energy that screamed, "I cost more than your ship." "Ah, welcome. Welcome," Krivox boomed, his translator chip giving him that generic mid-Atlantic accent that apparently every alien thought made them sound sophisticated. He spread all 4 arms wide like he was greeting royalty. Another customer drawn to the finest weaponry in the known galaxy. "Please, admire the craftsmanship of true advanced civilization." Jack stopped at the booth's edge, his eyes scanning the inventory with the practiced neutrality of someone who'd been to way too many of these expos. The weapons were impressive, sure, sleek, glowing, making little sci-fi noises that probably cost extra. "Just browsing?" Jack said, picking up a rifle that weighed about as much as a bread loaf, looking to outfit Earth's colonial defense fleet. "Thought I'd see what the galaxy has to offer." Krivox's 4 eyes lit up like he'd just spotted the sucker of the century walking through his door. This was going to be fun. Krivox's expression shifted into what Jack could only describe as predatory excitement, mixed with barely concealed contempt. It was a look he'd seen on car salesmen across 3 continents back on Earth. Apparently, the urge to rip off customers was a universal constant. "Earth," Krivox said, managing to make the word sound like a communicable disease. Yes, I'm familiar with your world. Still using kinetic projectile weapons, I understand? Chemical propellants and metal slugs?" He let out a laugh. That sounded like a garbage disposal choking on silverware. How charmingly rustic. "We call them guns," Jack said flatly. "Guns, yes." Krivox picked up one of his plasma rifles with 2 hands while gesturing dramatically with the other 2. "You see, my primitive friend, civilized species abandoned such crude technology millennia ago. Why throw bits of metal when you can project coherent plasma at 0.97 light speed?" He swung the rifle around in a way that probably violated several safety protocols. "This beauty can punch through 6 inches of reinforced durasteel, the DX7 plasma accelerator. Top of the line." Jack nodded slowly, playing the part. "Impressive. What's the effective range?" 1,500 meters with pinpoint accuracy, Krivox declared proudly. "Your ballistic weapons can't possibly compete with that kind of precision." Behind Krivox, a smaller alien that looked like a nervous ferret wearing a vest was organizing inventory. This was Plib, Krivox's assistant, and he was currently making a face that suggested he desperately wanted to be literally anywhere else. "And the power cell?" Jack asked, examining the rifle's housing. "How long does it last?" 200 shots per cell, Krivox said, waving a dismissive hand. "Though with accuracy like this, you'll never need that many. 1 shot, 1 kill, as they say. Unlike your spray and pray kinetic garbage. Maintenance schedule." Krivox's smile got wider. "Minimal. Perhaps a cleaning every 1,000 shots. Simple plasma residue removal. Nothing like your barbaric weapons that require constant attention. I've heard your soldiers spend more time cleaning their guns than using them. How inefficient." Jack kept his face neutral. "And if something goes wrong in the field?" "Goes wrong?" Krivox laughed again. "My dear human, these weapons are manufactured to Galactic Standard Specification 7. They don't go wrong. They're built by the finest technicians in the Thoraxian Empire using precision assembly techniques your species won't develop for another 5 centuries. Plib made a small squeaking sound that might have been a suppressed objection. Krivox shot him a look that could have melted durasteel. "Now then," Krivox continued, pulling up a holographic display, For a bulk order to equip your colonial fleet, I can offer you these magnificent weapons for only 8,000 credits per unit. A steal, really, considering you'll be upgrading from Stone Age technology. 8,000 credits. Jack had done his homework. The actual market rate for Thoraxian plasma rifles was around 3,000, and that was retail, not wholesale. That's very generous, Jack said, not even blinking. But I've got to ask, what's the failure rate in adverse conditions? Krivox's 4 eyes narrowed slightly. Failure rate? There is no failure rate. These weapons are perfect. Right, but what about rain, mud, electromagnetic interference, temperature extremes? Jack counted off on his fingers. You know the kind of stuff that happens in actual combat situations on actual planets? Those are non-issues for advanced civilizations, Krivox said, his tone getting slightly defensive. Proper military doctrine eliminates such variables. Huh, Jack said. That's interesting. Because back on Earth, we've got this saying. Something about how the enemy gets a vote. And Murphy's Law. And how everything that can go wrong will go wrong. Superstitious nonsense, Krivox sniffed. Perhaps relevant for your primitive expeditionary forces, but irrelevant for properly trained military personnel using superior technology. Jack set the plasma rifle down carefully. Tell you what, how about a demonstration? Your rifle versus one of our old-fashioned guns. Just to see how they compare under stress. Krivox's face lit up like someone had just offered him the chance to dunk on a toddler at basketball. Oh, this I have to see, he said, grinning with way too many teeth. Plib, clear the demonstration area. We're about to educate this human on the difference between real weapons and museum pieces. Plib looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole and die, but started clearing space anyway. Jack smiled. Not a big smile, just a small one. This was definitely going to be fun. Jack reached down and unlatched the hard case he'd been carrying since he walked into the expo. The magnetic seals hissed open, and he pulled out a standard-issue M4 carbine. Basic, reliable, about as exciting as a hammer, and just as effective at its job. The reaction was immediate. Krivox stared at the rifle like Jack had just pulled out a dead fish. Then he started laughing. Not a polite chuckle either. This was full-blown, bent over, slapping your knee laughter that echoed through the booth and into the surrounding marketplace. Within seconds, other vendors and customers started drifting over to see what was so funny. Is that, Krivox managed between gasps, is that actually a kinetic projectile weapon? You brought one here? To an arms expo? He wiped at his eyes with one hand while the other three gestured wildly at the rifle. Oh, this is priceless. Plib, are you recording this? Plib nervously held up a datapad, looking like he'd rather be recording literally anything else. A Zentari merchant from the next booth over leaned in, her translator making clicking sounds as she spoke. That's a powder-based propulsion system? Those still exist? On Earth, apparently. Another alien chimed in. Some species Jack didn't recognize with too many tentacles. I thought those were museum pieces. Jack waited for the laughter to die down, which took longer than it probably should have. He kept his expression completely neutral, the rifle held casually at his side. So, he said once Krivox had recovered enough to breathe normally, here's what I'm thinking. A friendly comparison test. Your plasma rifle against this, just to see how they stack up. Under real-world conditions. Krivox's 4 eyes gleamed with malicious joy. Oh, you cannot be serious. You want to compare that relic to cutting-edge Thoraxian technology? Unless you're worried about the outcome, Jack said mildly. That did it. Krivox's whole posture shifted, puffing up like someone had just questioned his honor at a formal duel. Worried? My dear, deluded human, I'm not worried. I'm doing you a favor by demonstrating exactly why your species needs to abandon its attachment to obsolete weaponry. Yes, absolutely. Let's have your little demonstration. The crowd was growing now. Arms dealers loved nothing more than watching other arms dealers prove their products were superior, or watching them fail spectacularly. Either way, it was entertainment. What did you have in mind for testing? Krivox asked, already radiating confidence. Jack shrugged. Standard field conditions, water immersion, sand exposure, temperature extremes, electromagnetic interference. No. The kind of stuff that happens when you're fighting on planets that aren't climate-controlled biodomes. Fine, whatever you want, Krivox said, waving dismissively. Plib, set up the environmental testing stations. Plib's face had gone from nervous to actively distressed. Sir, perhaps we should set them up, Plib. The small alien scurried off, muttering something under his breath that the translator couldn't quite catch, but Jack was pretty sure included the words, "bad idea," and "warned you." A Klaxon merchant elbowed his way to the front of the growing crowd. "I'll put 50 credits on the plasma rifle." "Make it 100, someone else called out. The human's about to learn an expensive lesson. Jack adjusted his grip on the M4 and smiled his small smile again. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Someone is." Plib returned pushing a hover cart loaded with testing equipment, looking like a condemned prisoner hauling his own execution device. He began setting up various stations around the demonstration area while the crowd pressed in closer, blocking foot traffic through the entire corridor. Station security didn't even bother breaking it up. They wanted to see this too. Jack watched as Plib assembled what looked like a transparent containment tank, a sandbox with some kind of agitation system, a thermal chamber, and an EMP generator that hummed ominously. Professional-grade stuff. Krivox clearly used these for legitimate demonstrations, which meant he had confidence in his products. Or he had until today. "Now then," Krivox announced loudly, playing to the crowd like a ringmaster at a circus. "Let's establish the parameters of this little educational exercise. We'll subject both weapons to identical stress tests. After each test, we'll fire at standard targeting dummies to verify functionality. Agreed?" "Agreed," Jack said. "Ladies first." Krivox's translator took a second to process that idiom, then his face twisted in what might have been annoyance. "How gracious. Very well. We'll begin with water immersion. A full 30-second submersion in standard H2O. He held up his plasma rifle like it was Excalibur. "Observe as this weapon, engineered by the finest minds in the Thoraxian Empire, emerges completely unaffected." He placed the rifle into the containment tank with exaggerated care. Plib filled it with water from a hose connection, the liquid rising until the weapon was completely submerged. The crowd murmured. 30 seconds felt like an eternity when you were watching water sit there doing absolutely nothing interesting. When the time elapsed, Krivox pulled the rifle out with a flourish, water streaming off its sleek surface. He shook it once, and the hydrophobic coating caused the remaining water to bead and roll off like mercury. "Completely dry," he announced. Now, to demonstrate functionality, he aimed at the targeting dummy 20 meters away, a standard ballistic gel torso on a stand. The plasma rifle hummed, building charge, and then released a bolt of superheated matter that hit the dummy dead center. The gel torso didn't just have a hole in it. It had a fist-sized crater that was still smoking. The crowd made appreciative noises. Even Jack had to admit it was impressive. "Your turn, human," Krivox said, gesturing magnanimously at the tank like a game show host offering a booby prize. Jack walked over and dunked the M4 into the water without ceremony. No flourish, no commentary, just straight into the tank, barrel and all. He let it sit there for the full 30 seconds while Krivox made exaggerated waiting gestures to the crowd, tapping an imaginary watch on his wrist. When the time was up, Jack pulled the rifle out. Water poured from the barrel, the receiver, everywhere. It looked like he'd just pulled it out of a river. He didn't shake it, didn't try to dry it, just turned, raised it to his shoulder, flipped off the safety, and fired 3 rounds. Bang. 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 3. Neat holes appeared in the backup dummy. Not as dramatic as a plasma crater, sure, but the dummy now had holes it didn't have before, which was sort of the point of shooting things. The crowd went quieter. Not silent, but definitely quieter. That was interesting. Krivox recovered quickly. Yes, well, simple mechanical systems can function when wet. Crude, but effective in that limited capacity. However, let's move to something more challenging: sand and particulate contamination. The sandbox was next. Plib activated the agitation system, and fine silicate particles began swirling in a contained storm. This wasn't beach sand. This was the kind of microscopic dust that got into everything and destroyed machinery from the inside out. Krivox placed his plasma rifle into the chamber. The sand blasted it from all angles for 30 seconds, coating every surface, getting into every seam. When he pulled it out, he used a compressed air nozzle to blow out the major accumulation. A standard field cleaning procedure. He fired again. Another perfect shot, another smoldering crater in a fresh dummy. "Precision engineering," he declared. "Tolerances measured in microns. This weapon is built to galactic standard specifications, which accounts for environmental contamination." Jack's turn. He opened the dust chamber and stuck the M4 inside. The sand blasted it, turning the black rifle a uniform tan color. When he pulled it out, he didn't bother with compressed air. He just racked the charging handle once, chambering a fresh round and ejecting whatever sand might have been in there, and fired. Bang. Bang, bang. 3 more holes. The crowd was definitely murmuring now. A few were pulling out data pads, probably looking up Earth weapon specifications, wondering if they'd missed something. Temperature stress, Krivox announced. Moving faster now, his confidence still intact but his showmanship becoming more aggressive. Extreme cold followed by extreme heat. This test destroys. Inferior weapons. Metal contraction and expansion. Lubricant failure. Material fatigue. The thermal chamber could swing from -50°C to +70 in controlled cycles. Krivox put his rifle through 2 complete cycles, the chamber frosting over and then heating until the air above it shimmered. When he removed it, the weapon was almost too hot to hold. He wrapped his hands in cloth and fired. Perfect shot. Another dead dummy. Jack put the M4 through the same process. When he pulled it out, the metal was radiating heat. He didn't wrap his hands. Just held it by the polymer furniture, aimed, and fired. Bang, bang, bang. Adequate, Krivox said, but his voice had lost some of its smugness. But now we come to the real test. Electromagnetic pulse simulation. This is what separates true military-grade equipment from civilian market toys. Plib wheeled over the EMP generator, and for the first time, Jack saw actual fear in the little alien's eyes. Plib glanced at his boss, opened his mouth like he was going to say something, then closed it again and looked away. Interesting. This device, Krivox explained to the crowd, simulates a tactical EMP burst, the kind generated by nuclear detonation or dedicated electronic warfare systems. It will completely shut down any unshielded electronic device. However, military equipment like my rifle has proper EMP hardening built into every circuit. He placed the plasma rifle into the EMP chamber with absolute confidence. Jack noticed that Plib had taken 3 steps backward and was very intently studying his datapad. Krivox activated the generator. There was a sharp crack, a flash of blue light, and every piece of electronic equipment within 3 meters flickered. Someone's datapad rebooted. The holographic price display at the next booth went dark for a second. Krivox removed his rifle from the chamber, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. And now, to demonstrate complete functionality after he pulled the trigger. Nothing. The grin froze. He pulled the trigger again. Still nothing. Not even a hum. Not even a light. The rifle was completely, utterly dead. Ah, Krivox said. Minor recalibration needed. The systems just need to reboot. This is normal. Plib, bring me the... It's not going to reboot, sir, Plib said quietly. What? The EMP hardening on the DX7 series. It's rated for 0.3 kiloteslas. That generator puts out 0.7. I tried to tell you last week that we needed to upgrade the... Not now, Plib, Krivox hissed. The crowd had gone completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop, assuming the pin wasn't electronic and had just been fried by the EMP. Jack walked over to the chamber and placed his M4 inside. My turn? Krivox's face had gone through several colors that probably didn't exist in human visible spectrum. That won't be necessary. We've clearly demonstrated. Oh, I insist, Jack said pleasantly. Fair is fair. He activated the EMP generator himself. Same crack, same blue flash, same flickering of nearby electronics. Jack pulled out the M4, raised it to his shoulder, flipped off the safety, and fired. Bang, bang, bang. 3 holes in a dummy that was rapidly running out of structural integrity. The silence stretched out for about 5 seconds. Then someone in the crowd started laughing. Then someone else. Then the entire corridor erupted in a mixture of laughter, shouting, and the sound of credits being transferred as bets were settled. Krivox stood there, holding his 8,000 credit plasma rifle, which was now functionally identical to an oddly shaped club. But, he stammered. But that's impossible. Your weapon has no EMP hardening. It's primitive. It's mechanical. Jack finished. Firing pin hits primer. Primer ignites powder. Powder propels bullet. No circuits. No computers. No electronics to fry. He patted the M4 affectionately. Just metallurgy and physics. The same metallurgy and physics. That's worked for 800 years. A Zentari merchant pushed forward. What about combined conditions? All stressors simultaneously? The crowd roared approval. This had gone from a demonstration to a spectacle, and nobody wanted it to end. Jack looked at Krivox. You want to try rebooting that rifle first, or should we just call it? Krivox's 4 hands were clenching and unclenching. For a moment, Jack thought he might actually take a swing. Then his shoulders sagged. Combined test, he said weakly. Plib, set it up. Plib looked at Jack with something approaching awe and started assembling what could only be described as a nightmare stress chamber. Water, sand, temperature swings, and EMP, all at once. Jack had a feeling Krivox's day was about to get even worse. Plib worked with the grim efficiency of someone assembling a gallows, connecting the water tank to the sandbox, routing the thermal chamber's outputs, and positioning the EMP generator to encompass the entire testing area. The result looked like something a mad scientist would use to torture appliances. "This is excessive," Krivox muttered, but the crowd was having none of it. "Combined test! Combined test!" Someone chanted, and others picked it up until the entire corridor sounded like a stadium before a championship match. Krivox looked at his plasma rifle, which still refused to power on. Then at the backup rifle, Plib had reluctantly retrieved from inventory. This was a DX-7B, supposedly an improved model. The B stood for better. "Probably. Fine," Krivox said, his voice lacking all the bombastic confidence from 10 minutes ago. "We'll conduct the combined environmental stress test, but I want it noted that no military equipment is designed to withstand simultaneous exposure to all of these conditions. This is an unrealistic scenario that would never occur in actual combat." "Right," Jack said, "because wars are famous for happening in controlled laboratory conditions." Someone in the crowd snorted. A three-eyed Vorgin was openly recording everything on multiple data pads. This was going to be all over the galactic net within the hour. Plib activated the nightmare chamber. Water began spraying while sand swirled in the air currents. The temperature cycled wildly, frost forming and melting in seconds. And every 5 seconds, the EMP generator pulsed, sending out electromagnetic waves that made people's teeth ache. Krivox placed his backup rifle into the chaos with the delicate care of a parent putting a child on their first day of school. A parent who knew the school was actually a meat grinder. 30 seconds felt like 30 minutes. When Plib shut down the chamber, Krivox's rifle emerged looking like it had fought in 3 wars and lost all of them. Sand caked every surface. Water dripped from the barrel. The usually pristine alloy finish was spotted with thermal stress marks, and the power indicator light was dark. Very, very dark. Krivox pulled it out, his 4 hands shaking slightly. He tried the trigger. Nothing. He checked the power cell connection, reseated it, tried again. Nothing. He pulled out a diagnostic scanner, ran it over the weapon, and stared at the results. His face went through an impressive range of emotions: confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally settling on what humans would call existential dread. "The primary plasma accelerator coil is fused," he said quietly. "The targeting computer is fried. The power regulation system has a short somewhere in the primary circuit, and there's sand in the gas chamber." He looked up at the crowd. "This weapon is non-functional." The crowd made various noises of sympathy, but everyone was already looking at Jack. Jack picked up his M4, which had been sitting to the side, still dripping water from the earlier test. He walked over to the nightmare chamber and placed it inside without ceremony. "Same settings?" he asked Plib. Plib nodded mutely and activated the sequence. Water, sand, temperature swings, and electromagnetic pulses assaulted the rifle from every angle. The M4 sat there and took it like a boxer who'd been hit so many times he'd stopped feeling pain. When 30 seconds elapsed, Jack pulled it out. It looked terrible. Sand everywhere, water pouring from every opening. The black finish was scratched and spotted. It looked like something you'd find in a dumpster behind a military surplus store. Jack tilted it to the side, letting water drain from the barrel. Then he racked the charging handle, ejecting a round that was wet, sandy, and had probably seen better days. He let the bolt slam forward, chambering a fresh round from the magazine. The crowd held its collective breath. Jack raised the rifle, aimed at the last intact dummy, and squeezed the trigger. Bang! The dummy sprouted a hole. He fired again. Bang! Another hole. And a third time. Bang! The dummy's structural integrity gave up entirely, and it collapsed off its stand. The corridor erupted. Not just in cheers or laughter, but in actual chaos. Aliens were shouting, shoving forward to get a better look at the rifle, pulling out communication devices to call their suppliers, their militaries, their purchasing departments. A Klaxon merchant was practically climbing over people. "How much for bulk orders? What's your production capacity? I'll pay double whatever he offers." Someone else shouted, "Triple." A dignified-looking alien in what appeared to be a military uniform pushed through the crowd. "I represent the Andromedan Defense Consortium. We need to discuss contracts. Immediately." Jack stood there, still holding the dripping, sandy, beat-to-hell rifle, watching Krivox's customer base evaporate in real time. Aliens who had been browsing Krevox's booth minutes ago were now crowding around Jack, shoving credit chips at him, demanding specifications, asking about licensing agreements. Krevox had gone very quiet. He stood there holding his expensive, sophisticated, completely non-functional plasma rifle, watching his entire sales pitch crumble to dust. His 4 arms hung limply at his sides. Even his posture had deflated. Plib patted his boss on the shoulder sympathetically, then quietly started packing up the testing equipment. But it doesn't make sense, Krevox said to no one in particular. Primitive technology shouldn't outperform advanced engineering. It's not logical. It's not how progress works. Jack finally managed to extract himself from the mob long enough to walk over to Krevox. Up close, the arms dealer looked like someone who'd just watched their worldview get shot 3 times in the chest. Want to know the secret? Jack asked, his voice low enough that only Krevox could hear. Krevox looked at him with all 4 eyes, something desperate and confused in his expression. Jack smiled, not his small smile, a genuine one. Progress isn't about making things more complicated, he said. It's about making things that work when everything else fails. Jack set the M4 down on Krevox's counter, right next to the dead plasma rifle. The contrast was almost poetic. One sleek, sophisticated, and useless. The other battered, dripping, and fully functional. Here's the thing about primitive, Jack said, raising his voice just enough for the lingering crowd to hear. Primitive doesn't mean bad. It means proven. It means refined over centuries of people shooting at each other in every hellhole environment you can imagine. Rain, snow, desert, jungle, vacuum, underwater, you name it. If there's a place where things can go wrong, someone's fired one of these there. The Andromedan Defense Consortium officer was still hovering nearby, practically vibrating with impatience. Mr. Torres, we really must discuss terms. In a minute, Jack said, not looking away from Krevox. I'm making a point. He picked up the M4 again, dropped the magazine, racked the charging handle to clear the chamber, and handed it to Krevox. Here, feel that weight? That's steel and polymer. No exotic alloys. No rare earth elements that cost more than a shuttle. Just materials you can find on practically any industrial world. You know what that means? Krevox held the rifle like it might bite him. What? It means when your fancy plasma rifle bricks itself in the middle of a firefight, and you can't get replacement parts because the nearest Thoraxian supply depot is 6 jumps away, this thing will still be working. Jack tapped the rifle's receiver. And when it does break, any mechanic with a basic machine shop can fix it. No proprietary tools, no authorized technicians, no waiting 3 weeks for a replacement coil that costs 800 credits. A murmur ran through the crowd. Jack could see the calculations happening behind dozens of different types of eyes. Logistics officers were doing math. Quartermaster types were thinking about supply chains. Anyone who'd ever had to maintain military equipment in place presented. The field was having revelations. So here's my offer, Jack continued, pulling out a datapad. Earth Defense Solutions. That's my company. We manufacture firearms, ammunition, and accessories. All of it simple, all of it reliable, all of it field serviceable. Our prices are reasonable because we're not selling you magic. We're selling you tools that work. He projected a hologram from the pad. Specifications, prices, bulk discount schedules, licensing options for local production. The crowd pressed closer. The M4 carbine you've seen demonstrated today. 300 credits per unit for orders over 1,000. Ammunition is 5 credits per 100 rounds. We also produce pistols, sniper rifles, shotguns, and crew-served weapons. All tested in conditions that would make your engineers cry. 300? Someone in the crowd said, that's less than a tenth of what Krevox charges for a weapon that stops working when you look at it wrong. Yeah, Jack said, we price, based on what it costs to make something good, not what we think we can squeeze out of people who don't know better. That earned him some appreciative clicks and whistles from the crowd. Nothing endeared you to customers quite like implying the competition was ripping them off, which, to be fair, they were. The Andromedan officer elbowed his way to the front. We'll take 50,000 units as an initial order. Can you provide training packages for our personnel? Absolutely. Training is included for bulk orders over 10,000 units. I'll take 20,000, the Klaxon merchant said. My clients are going to love these. 15,000 for the Zentari Defense Forces, another voice called out. Jack pulled up his order interface and started logging requests. The numbers climbing on his screen would have made his quarterly projections look like a rounding error. Krevox's booth, meanwhile, had completely cleared out. Even the curious browsers were gone. It was just him, Plib, and a whole lot of expensive inventory that nobody wanted anymore. Jack finished processing the initial orders and turned back to Krivox. The Thoraxian looked smaller somehow, like someone had let the air out of him. "For what it's worth," Jack said, his voice gentler now, "your rifle is actually pretty impressive. When it works great. The problem is the when it works part." He gestured at the testing equipment. "You built something amazing for controlled environments. We built something adequate for chaos. Different design philosophies. But yours is better," Krivox said quietly. "For certain definitions of better. Yeah," Jack admitted. "We gave up power and precision for reliability. That's a trade-off. In a clean fight on a nice day, your rifle wins. But in a real fight?" He shrugged. "Real fights aren't clean." Plib had finished packing and was hovering nervously behind his boss. "Sir, we should probably head back. Regroup. Maybe recalibrate our market." "Approach." Krivox nodded slowly, still staring at the M4. "I came here expecting to make the sale of the quarter, maybe the year." He laughed, but it was hollow. "Instead, I got humiliated by a human selling antiques." "Hey," Jack said, "look at it this way. You did teach me something today." "What's that?" Jack grinned. "Never bet against something that survived 800 years of people trying to improve it. If it was really that primitive, someone would have replaced it by now." He extended his hand for a shake. Krivox looked at it for a moment, then clasped it with one of his 4 hands. The handshake was limp, defeated, but it was something. "Good luck with your sales," Krivox said, and there was no sarcasm in it, just exhaustion. "You too," Jack said. "Seriously, there's a market for high-performance weapons. Just maybe not the market you thought." Krivox and Plib packed up their booth and shuffled away through the corridor, leaving behind only some scorch marks on the Belady, testing dummies and a lot of sand. Jack turned back to the crowd that was still clamoring for his attention. The Vorgian with all the recording equipment pushed forward. "Mr. Torres, this footage is going viral across 12 systems already. Can I get a statement about Earth Defense Solutions' expansion into the galactic market?" Jack thought about it for a second, then looked directly at the camera. "Yeah," he said. "When the galaxy zigs, Earth zags. And sometimes the old ways are old because they work." He picked up the M4 one more time, still sandy and wet, and held it up. "We're not selling you the future," he said. "We're selling you something better. We're selling you a gun that'll still work when the future breaks down." The camera kept rolling, the orders kept coming in, and somewhere in the back of Jack's mind, he was already composing the email to corporate. Subject: exceeded quarterly projections by 4,000%. Will explain later. Send more rifles. He smiled his small smile again. It had been a good day at the office.